Since the dawn of its existence, the United States of America has been dependent on immigration and the conquest of land. Puritans immigrated to the New World on the Mayflower in search of a better life and settled on Native American soil. In the 19th century, Americans illegally settled in Tejano land, triggering the Mexican-American War. When the war ended in 1848 with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, Americans gained nearly the entire Southwest from Mexico, a landmark moment in Mexican-American relations. The American dream is rooted in the presence of migrant workers. Capitalism in America is contingent on having a surplus of laborers willing to work back-breaking jobs. Yet, the history of American consumption is tainted with the exploitation of migrants. By focusing on the years 1942 to 1964, one can see how American diplomacy with Mexico has spurred one of the most intense and ironic debates in American history.
1848, Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo awards U.S. over half of Mexico's territory.
1858 to 1861, Mexico fights a civil war of reform, leaving Mexicans in deep poverty.
1876 to 1911, increase in Mexican railroads makes it easier for Mexicans to journey to the U.S. in search of a better life.
1902, Reclamation Act of 1902 allows the U.S. government to convert the desert American Southwest into farmland, creating an even greater demand for cheap labor.
1924. The Immigration Act of 1924 creates the first U.S. Border Patrol as well as the discriminatory quota system of immigration. The act was created in response to a growing nativist movement at a time where all immigrants were discriminated against because they were different, most notably by their language.
It's hard to blame, the XYZ Corp, but it's a lot easier to blame that guy who doesn't even speak English.
We felt inferior to the point where, speaking Spanish was something you didn't want to do in front of Anglo people.
1929. The Great Depression causes even greater hatred towards Mexicans as Americans fear an oversupply in the labor force.
1940s and onward. The U.S. enters World War II, causing a renewed need for surplus labor. In Mexico, the Institutional Revolutionary Party comes to power, determined to put Mexico's agricultural industry into the global economy, and out of the hands of the Mexican people, thrusting them once again into poverty. The Bracero program was America's first and largest government-sanctioned guest worker program. With much of the American workforce leaving to fight in World War II, the American agriculture and railroad industries were flirting with collapse. The industries needed new arms, or brazos, from which the name of the program was derived. Knowing that Mexicans were willing to leave their homes to pursue a better life, American diplomats proposed that Mexicans be able to contract with American growers on a temporary basis. In theory, poverty-stricken Mexicans would get the opportunity to earn money for their families that they could not earn in Mexico, and American growers would stay afloat while their labor force was defending their country. Yet, it would not take long for this American diplomacy to cause intense debate both in the U.S. and across the border in Mexico.
How the Bracero program has affected America was that it allowed growth. Railroads were built, infrastructure was arranged.
The stoop labor situation being what it is, I don't see how the local farmers can get along without Bracero. Without this source of labor, many farmers are going to be unable to make a profit, and we sure don't want this to happen.
Mexicans that migrated north faced many hardships. In Mexico, they were the center of debate. Migrants were accused of abandoning their home economy in times of trouble. All the while, families were pushing the migrants to contract as braceros. Arriving in the States was not any easier for Mexicans. The migrants were forced through dehumanizing medical inspections. They were doused with the pesticide DDT, forced to march stark naked in front of officers and other braceros, and were given invasive genital and rectal exams.
It's been a hell of a road, it's been a beautiful rose, it's been cold.
In the fields, treatment of the braceros did not improve. Growers controlled the migrants by constantly threatening them with deportation. Living in fear, braceros felt they could not speak up against mistreatment. Food was one of the most common injustices. Meals consisting of sour beans, remains from previous meals, and smelly meat were the norm.
Also, they were afraid that if they make any kind of criticism, if they rock the boat at all, that's it for them.
there wasn't anything implemented so that people had human rights, what we call a living wage.
Despite the fact that growers went unpunished for paying extremely low wages, contracting braceros was still expensive for both the growers and the migrants. Knowing that they would not be reprimanded by the government, growers began actively recruiting Mexicans to cross the border illegally. Illegal immigration allowed the growers to set even lower wages and evade workers' rights requirements set in the Bracero contracts. In Texas, migrants faced a troubling paradox. Growers were so desperate for their labor that they would illegally recruit them, while Americans living in Texas harbored extreme racism towards migrants. Racism towards Mexicans was one of the main causes of Operation Wetback, a forced repatriation program issued at the height of the Bracero program. Operation Wetback led to the deportation of 1.3 million Mexican migrants, legal immigrants, and U.S. citizens of Mexican descent. It occurred when the U.S. was experiencing its first economic slump since the Great Depression. Throughout U.S. history, a push-pull relationship with migrants has developed. When times are good, Americans look to migrants to fill the undesirable labor jobs. But when times are bad, migrants are accused of stealing American jobs, even when those migrants have been actively recruited by American growers.
American diplomacy with Mexico throughout the Bracero program has had consequences extremely important to the modern immigration debate, most notably an increase in both legal and illegal immigration from Mexico.
Well, when you're immigrating from Mexico legally, the major problem is the time that it takes to immigrate.
Other consequences included militarization of the U.S.-Mexico border and legislation such as NAFTA that has led to the relocation of U.S. corporations to Mexico. For Mexicans, the Bracero program did eventually lead to civil rights movements, such as the United Farm Workers Movement led by Cesar Chavez, and more recently, the Zapatista uprising in the state of Chiapas. Today, debate over immigration is the most intense it's been since the 1930s. It has caused a divide among Americans and created an us versus them complex among migrants and citizens. Areas just north of the border harbor extreme hatred towards the undocumented. In spring of 2010, Arizona enacted a law that intended to repatriate undocumented workers, but in turn legalized racism. The Bracero program has also caused debate within the migrant community itself. Older Bracero-era Mexicans despise young migrants because they are a threat to the older generation's job security. With the unemployment rate at one of its highest, immigration has also ignited debate across the political aisle. Some claim that undocumented workers are taking the few available American jobs. Others say that no American would be able to swallow their pride and take the jobs that Mexican migrants are willing to take.
You haven't had a job in, 9 months. Have you volunteered to go and do that work? They pay you. They pay you crap, but they pay you. You don't need special skills. No, you do not apply for those jobs.
Right.
And I wouldn't either. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm morally superior, but Anglos will not do it. I mean, native-born Americans will not do it.
Now is the time not to pardon illegal immigration, but to assess the United States policy with Mexico. Diplomacy started this great debate, and now diplomacy will be responsible for ending it. There is no easy solution to this problem. It will require cooperation and attention from great minds on all sides of our society's borders, from conservatives and liberals, citizens and migrants, Mexican and American diplomats. Now is the time to bring the issue of immigration to the forefront of our legislative agenda. Now is the time to treat the issue of immigration not as a burden, but an opportunity to bring hope to people of poverty and to revitalize the American dream.
It's been a long road, it's been a hell of a road, it's been a beautiful rose, it's been cold. I've seen a couple people be bold after they were told they didn't have it. Seen a friend get shot down and go right back.